Now I come to our specific case study in the framework of Tiger and in the WP 2.3 or whatever. We decided to take Italy as our focus, and in particular to study international students at the Sapienza University. In some way, it's a division of work between our team and the team that Jan has presented. Also in Italy, as well as in the rest of the world, the number of international students has grown. These are just two examples of the year 2004-2006. You can just see that there has been an increase in the relative importance of international students at national level. If we focus on Rome, and here we have all the universities located in Rome, so not only Sapienza, here we have the total of the universities in Rome, and here we have Sapienza, we can see that in this metropolitan region, number of international students in 2009 almost reached 12,000. That in absolute terms, it's not a very large number. And we can see that basically more than 50% of those students are studying at Sapienza. And now I focus on the specific case of our university, the university that is hosting us. Some ideas about the gender and geographical composition of our international students. First of all, what it's probably not surprising is that majority of international students in this university is represented by women. So girls in this Sapienza University are in number more than boys. The majority of them come from countries located in Eastern Europe, especially if we take only the female part, and right after from other countries from Western Europe. So thinking about the reasoning about regionalization, we can say that Sapienza fits in that model of being attractive for especially students coming from the ESPON space, so being in the same macro region. Here there is a detail of the country of origin. We see the first country represented is Albania, right after Romania, Greece, Iran, Poland, Peru, Israel, and so on. So Eastern Europe is dominant. Here indeed we have a classification by faculty. So the international students who decide to spend their study lifetime in Sapienza, what do they study? Why they're here? The most represented faculty, again, especially if I take into account the female part, is medicine. Right after we have economics, architecture, and very importantly, arts and humanities, the faculty where we are now. Why this? I will probably say something more in a few minutes, but what I can already say is that we are in Rome, and our university is particularly specialized and particularly famous at worldwide for few disciplines. Arts and humanities are among them. Medicine, considering other statistics that I will not present here today, is more attractive in general for what concerns Italy. I would not expect that medicine drops in lower ranks if I take the University of Milan or the University of Naples. So I would say at the first glance that medicine is something attractive all over Italy. Arts and humanities is something in which Sapienza is specialized. Here, just as an example, I put this map where we have the country of origin, I would say place of birth more correctly, of the students of the Faculty of Human Sciences. Here, of course, we have the prevalence of Eastern European students, Western European students, but also Latin America is pretty well represented. The third part of my presentation, that is the core of our research in the framework of Tiger, concern, let's say, the attempt to answer to some questions that are posed to us by the scholars and that are on the table of the debate nowadays. We interrogated ourselves about these themes. To better say, we asked ourselves and we tried to answer to the question, what does really matter? Why do students come here? We know where they come from. We know what do they study when they're here. We probably can imagine their lifestyle, but which are the true reasons, or I would say not the true reason, but what are the reasons that more likely affect their decisions? And searching in the literature, we have summarized the main question from our point of view into that list. Does the national migratory policy affect the decision of international students to study at Sapienza? Does the spatial proximity have an importance? Is there any common language that can affect that decision, or the existence of past colonial ties? Then, are there differences in the GDP of Italy and the country of origin of those students? And does it exist a well-established national community here, in particular in Rome? Then we move to some specific questions concerning university or academia, that are the role and importance of university fees that have just been mentioned before my intervention, the quality of the university according to international rankings, and Jan has already discussed about that point at international level, then the role and importance of social networks, I mean, the relationship between students, between young persons. How did we try, I say try because it's an ongoing project, ongoing research, how did we try to answer to those questions? We have circulated a questionnaire to 100 international students at Sapienza University of Rome. And the questionnaire was very, very, very extremely detailed. If I remember correctly, around 50 questions. I will not discuss each of them, but the main areas we covered concern general information about the person, the student, the migratory path the student follow before arriving here, his or her life in Rome, the relationship and, let's say, the life at the university and the university career, their education, their personal needs, and the way they socialize. After, or I would say at the same time as the questionnaire were going on, we also selected a small number of students attending courses at the Faculty of Human Sciences, and we did in-depth interviews. In the second case, for the in-depth interviews, they are still ongoing. I will not present the results here. So I will only concentrate on the first part of this list, on the first part of our survey, the questionnaires. Some results, very, let's say, descriptive results for the moment. One question concerned the families of the students. We asked them, which is the condition of your family, what does the head of the family do? And many of them answered the breadwinner or head of the family is retired. Others answered is a businessman, white collar, blue collar, up to craftsman and peasant. The first idea out of these numbers is that at the moment, only looking at this result, we cannot say that these students come from families who probably migrated here for economic reason following the push-pull theory at this first analysis, very first and very preliminary. This consideration is important because in our survey we have not interviewed students who are here within international agreements. We have deliberately excluded Erasmus students or students who are here for some academic relationships. So they are here because they chose to be here. And this first graph tends to suggest us that they are not here following their families. They are not here because they are children of young families who moved here for job-related reasons. Second picture, where do they come from? As you can see, almost half of them are coming from very large cities of more than 3 million of inhabitants. So urban areas, mainly. That is probably also confirmed by the former graph I've shown. In any case, if I take the group of cities represented by the first column, the second and the third, basically I go up to 80% of students coming from cities with more than 100,000 inhabitants, so mid-sized, large cities. This question concerned the migratory path. We asked them, when did you leave your home country? Means how many months have passed since your departure from home country. Here you can see this limit of 15 months means the majority of students, I would say almost all of them, left their country less than 4 years ago. This is a confirmation those students came here to study with the purpose of attending university courses. They're not here because they left their country when they were kids or teenagers and remained here. They came with the purpose of attending courses here. And the second question, just to confirm the first one, was how many months passed since you arrived in Rome? And the two graphs are not identical, but they are very similar. Means they came, and they came directly to Rome. That confirmed our first hypothesis. Why did you leave home? Which was the, let's say, the force that induced you to leave. And as you can see, and as we probably could expect, the study reason is the first one. More than 80% of students answered, I moved because I wanted to study. And the other reasons have much less importance. We are going to the core of our study. Why did you choose Rome? Or why did you choose Sapienza, since we interviewed them? The first answer, more than 50% of them answered because of the university reputation. And in this assessment, we believe that the faculty they have chosen is important. Then here we have two different answers that we can combine them. More than 30% of them said scholarship, and 20% of them said low university fees. Students, of course, could choose more than one answer. They are not to be summed up. So means that the fact that this university is not asking a very high fee, and the fact that many of them could get a scholarship is an important factor that induced them to come to Sapienza. Then some of them said family reunions or the presence of friends in the same university. Here, the question that was posed to Jan by Martin. I do not have a clear answer because we asked to these students, is Rome your final destination? Implicitly means after you will finish university, you will get your degree. Will you stay or will you go? Answers are not clear, not to me at this moment. More than 60% of them said no, I wouldn't stay. So it seems that the only reason why they're here is to study and get a degree. and more than 50% of them want to go back to their home country. So if I have to answer to the question that was posed to Jan, I would say in this case, no. Coherently, their main objective before going back home for those who will go back is to obtain a degree. And coherently with what I said, that these students are here without their family, is that the majority of them are living in students' residence, in dormitories. Many of them have a job in Italy to support themselves with, of course, a temporary contract, part-time contracts, because they must be students. Which are our preliminary conclusions? This is the list of questions, and we have tried to give an answer. We can reasonably surely say that the Italian migratory policy, the existence of a common language, of colonial ties, cannot be considered as reasons for those students to come here. If somebody later will talk about Italy and migration in Italy, it will become even clearer. We found in a first assessment that the spatial proximity, the differences in GDP, and the existence of a national community are moderately important factors, as much as the quality of the university, and what we could assess as very important are the role of university fees and the role of networks, the existence of other students already studying here. For what concerns the quality of university, we would have put very important if we would have chosen only specific faculties, but Sapienza as a whole, we would say important. Before leaving you, I would like to thank the student who collaborated to the implementation of our survey, Hind, Nina, who is here, Hind, who is here, Adit, who is here, and Hossein, that spiritually is with us. And I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Some questions? Some questions. Yes, we have started from Klaus and then Jan. Yes, Barbara. Moment, I'm coming.
Barbara, thank you very much for the very good insight into the situation of the students studying here. When I listen to your presentation, I see, oh, the generation of students is very realistic and very success-oriented. Why don't they, if you have asked me about many years ago, why I perhaps would study in Rome, I would say Rome is a wonderful city. This is a very attractive place where I could live and study. You don't got those answers in your survey?
Yeah, I think that the fact that Rome is a very attractive city is an important factor. In this part of the presentation and in that part of the research, we focused on Sapienza University. So, leaving aside all the other universities. But yes, if I would have to say yes or not, answer yes or not to your question, I would say Rome as a city is important, especially when it's combined to the study in arts and humanities, in literature and so on.
Klaus, this is a beautiful city, but it's also a city which has a lot of problems. This is why we started before Tiger to consider the issue, because we wanted to know the needs, because our rector, and this is broadcasted not within the Sapienza, everywhere, in general is not interested. Personally, sometimes he asks me to go on, but if you look, I mentioned the London School of Economics. They haven't received any special grant from the European Union. They are using their own money. They decided to make this money because to use this money for such a research because it's strategic. Sapienza University, which, by the way, has about 140,000 students, of course, has other priorities, We have only in terms of professor about 5,000, so surely there are other priorities, but it's a mistake. It's a mistake for at least 3 reasons. The first reason is because these are people interested at us. I mean, when they consider Rome, Sapienza is very important because in a very important historic city, in a very important historic university, is fundamental. The second point is because our Lord Mayor is very happy when we have 2 or 3% of increase of tourists. Sometimes the tourists are cooperating to the income of the city much less than the students because we started to make this work again because they were mainly at our courses. Since we are teaching tourism, we have about 20-30% of our students that in the numbers of the Sapienza, it means 60, 70 students every year. They are coming from abroad, but not from the nearby country, from all over the world. So this is also as an economic importance. And also because with the conclusion expressed by Barbara, that by the way I've seen for the same time she wrote during the night, which I agree fully. Of course, this is the situation. If you take all the parameters that has been used by Jan and other colleagues, here there is not, the problem of language is a problem. There is a problem, the fact that there is no help to the students, especially the foreign students, there is not a special attention, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. By the way, there is this thing. So it's very interesting to go further with this kind of analysis. Before I consume all the time, yeah.
Thank you, Armando. Just thank you, Barbara, for your presentation. And I think that all your results will be very easily combined with ours. There is a strong complementarity. So I just have 2 questions. When you say on one of the first slides, you showed the origins of the international students in La Sapienza, and there was former Soviet, Eastern Europe. Does it mean former Soviet Union or the new members of the European Union? This is my first question.
New members of EU.
Okay, the new members. And do you think, maybe, I think that you won't have the time to do this kind of study in the framework of Tiger because it is time consuming. Do you think that there is a correlation between the attractiveness of a university, and maybe you said that, but maybe I did not understand, and the size of the city where the university, the size of the city where the university is? For example, do you think that there would be strong differences between the results for Rome and Naples and Milano, as you said, for example?
You mean if I take into account this information?
No, this is the provenance, but
yes.
Would it be the same for the destination? For example, would the results for Rome at the destination city, would there be different from the results for Milan and Naples?
Okay.
The sizes of the city in Naples and Rome are not the same.
This is something we have not faced so far, and because those are our own data, so it's not the general data. My general wide idea is that for sure financial capital city like Milan will have a different pattern in terms of origin, but probably they will show a similar behavior in terms of the size of the origin cities. I would not be very sure about southern Italian cities, even large as Naples is, because of a problem of image.
Because in France, whatever the size of the city... Microphone, please.
Microphone, sorry.
Just one final remark to complete what you say. In France, whatever the size of the city is, if you look at the University of Marseille, of Paris, of Rennes and Lyon, the pattern, the geographical pattern of their international agreements and partnerships is roughly the same. And there is not real difference.
Okay. In that case, we should do an ad hoc survey considering the academic agreements.
In any case, I think that we can conclude the first part. We can thank Barbara for concluding also the first session. We have a break. Before leaving you free to go to the coffee house outside, I received a message following this experiment today. Someone has asked me if GLOBILITY is going to be only online during the next years. My answer is no. On the contrary, next year we have already planned a meeting in Cologne, so we'll be in Germany, and in the year 2013 we'll be in Japan. And I'm sure that in Germany Klaus will be the coordinator of our activity, and Yoshi, I hope, if he's not too much busy with the entire conference, will also organize a special GLOBILITY session. So thank you very much. Have 30 minutes break, everybody, both in Rome and in the world, for a break. Thank you.
Yeah, dear audience, due to my responsibility, Armando, thank you very much, to chair the next session, I would give a very short introduction in the next presentations. We have, at the first, we have a continuation in looking to the impact of student migration. This will be the next presentation, and then we have two new topics, contributions about the mobility affected by disasters, especially in Japan. I think this is a new and very interesting topic too, and perhaps we can also think about climatical change and if we bring migration in this connection together. As you know from the first session, Armando told us you have 20 minutes time and 10 minutes to discussion, and that I hope it will be enough time for each presentation. We start with the international mobility of university students, reflections from 2 case studies of mid-sized cities in northern Italy, a little different from the formerly presentations. Carlo Brusa, we have had him from Piemonte Orientale University Vercelli, and David Davide Papotti, Parma University. He will be presenting this presentation. Please.
Thank you very much to all of you for being here, and thanks also to the people who are following us on the web. This paper has been prepared jointly with Professor Brusa, who introduced the morning session, and I'm presenting today. I'm very happy about the order of the papers presented so far, because our paper fits very well in the progression of presentations dedicated to the mobility of international students. And actually we are dealing also following some of the questions of the last debate with a different context, a geographical context, and we are mainly dealing with international students at the University of Vercelli in north-western Italy, near Turin, and the University of Parma, again in northern Italy, midway between Milan and Bologna, who are sort of mid-sized cities. Vercelli actually is a little bit smaller, has about 48,000 inhabitants, and Parma has 180,000 inhabitants, just to give a general frame of the geographical context. Just to summarize, many of the issues that are raised in this slide have been explained in the previous papers, but of course the starting point was that migratory movements among university students and teachers represent an aspect of geographical mobility that is gaining a growing importance. and is gaining a growing importance due to the complexity of factors that are actually at stake in this form of mobility, because we have different kinds of relations that are involved in these exchanges, educational, cultural, and economic. We already saw these aspects. That must be investigated at a transscalar nature. We are using here the term transscalar following the definition by an economic geographer that works at the University of Turin, Piero Bonavero, who speaks, I will have the bibliographic references in the last slide, in a work from 2005 about different forms of transscalarity, from weak to strong transscalarity. Meaning the difference in the interaction between the different levels that the transscalar approach involves. The geographical approach can usefully contribute to the investigation of this phenomenon, pointing out, of course, the territorial dimension and the spatial aspects. So what favors the mobility of international students? I'm using here, of course, pull factors in brackets. We have heard this morning from Armando the reference to the fact that push and pull factors are linked to the modern setting, and we have to overcome this. But we are speaking here of a service that is offered, educational service, and we have to talk about the attractiveness of the institutions. So, of course, the international movements of students are favored by international partnerships. As Barbara was saying, and I was very interested in the paper they presented, of course, Erasmus students are short-term exchange programs, but nevertheless, they do contribute to the the creation of cultural images of countries, and they do surely have a link with the creation of geographical imagery and in the process of making decisions about the destination. So, of course, we have to separate them when we are dealing with statistical analysis, but from a cultural point of view, there is surely an exchange between short-term institutional organized projects of exchange among universities and long-term migratory projects by individual and independent students. And the general context is, of course, that of a growing competition among universities, both at the national and international level. Of course, and here again the transscalar dimension is the fact that in Italy there is a huge internal mobility of university students, especially with a dominant flow from the south to northern university, but also related to a power of attraction of the University of Rome, and of course of many other smaller cases that are due to specialized school and courses and curricula in universities. This happens in a context in Italy in which ranking is not yet a well-established practice at the national institutional level, and it's developing this theme due to the recent reformation of the university system. Mobility of international students is a migratory phenomenon and must be interpreted in the complexity of factors at stake that we also heard before, and must be interpreted as a total social fact, because it affects the whole human complexity of the protagonist. Of course, differences in gender, we heard about the data about the university foreign students, here the Sapienza. Of course, the role of the family, which was mentioned before. Of course, the family can be in the country of origin, abroad, or can be in the foreign country as well. We already talked about cultural encounter, levels of income, of course, religion, ethnicity, if we want to use it in brackets, of course, but and many other factors that are at stake in this. What we want to present today is a a problematic perspective. So some reflections, as the title suggests, that came out from our work of investigation in these small universities that, of course, have much smaller numbers than the ones that we saw before. We will have a couple of tables in a few slides. And, of course, we are dealing really with numbers of a few dozens, so at another quantitative scale. So what we want to propose today to contribute to the debate of this morning session are some thoughts about the interaction between the experience of international students and the wider cultural exchange among people in the hosting country and in the country of origin, and especially related to the dimension of time. So we divided elements that are affected by the mobility of international students in short-term, medium-term, and long-term elements. Of course, short-term elements that are at stake, the choice. We already saw in the previous papers the importance of the choice of the university, but also it's not only the university. It must be even more, it can be even more fragmented. The school, of course, the humanities school, doing, as Barbara was suggesting, enrolling at a humanities school in Rome has a different flavor than in a town that has less historical heritage, for instance. Also, the individual curricula that you can find in universities. 3 years curricula, 2 years curricula, or even 1 year masters, of course, and they do establish different projects among international students. Of course, we have to take into consideration the relationships between the host country and the host city and town. We spoke earlier, and we heard many comments about the idea of links at the national level, colonial ties, for instance. But even at the level of singular town or cities connection within the national context are important. We already heard today about the problems of physical, economic distance, cultural distance. We already heard about the cost of the stay, of course, tuition and fees. We have to put them together, not only how much the university costs, but also how much living in a place where the university is costs. And of course, here the role of small, medium-sized towns like Vercelli and Parma, which tend to be less expensive than larger metropolitan contexts. Language problems, of course, role of ethnic networks, and here one of the most interesting field of research, in our opinion, are the links between the immigrant flows and the student flows in Italy, which are very complex also because of bureaucratic reasons. We will see that in the analysis of tables. The length of stay, of course, and the general level of services in the destination country. This is the level of what, in a work published here in a miscellaneous volume here in Italy, Janice Monk called Connecting People, Places and Ideas, 3 levels of exchanges. So all these factors that you see here are important, and we have also to consider the new phenomena happening in Italian universities of few experiments of curricula, single courses taught in English. For instance, business schools are starting this quite frequently, less frequently humanities school and other schools. Of course, the level we can add to the list that we read before, the availability of courses of Italian language for foreigners, since, of course, still the vast majority of courses is taught in Italian. Medium-term considerations. The mobility of international students falls into the wider processes of formation and consolidation of a human capital, both within the receiving society and the societies in the countries of origin. And here, from a cultural point of view, and in the analysis that geographers do of the geographical imagery, there is this an important component in the cultural exchanges of the student population about the so-called invention of ethnicity. We borrow the term from a few scholars, in particular Kathleen Nielsen-Konzen, which in an article that was published in the book The Invention of Ethnicity, that is from 1989, and the following year in a joint article with other authors spoke about this processes of creation of ethnicity as a label in the cultural encounter between different societies. And the development of national images shared at the international level finds in the international students exchange a key moment. Long-term considerations on the long run, the problem of return migration, students that do take a degree and then, as we were seeing in the questionnaire about the La Sapienza, decide to go back. So what is this phenomenon? A brain drain of international students going abroad, or the establishment of a class of mediators of international relationships? So what are the factors at stake? Universities are or not, or should not, or could not be total institutions. One other factor that I would add to the discussion is the level of permeability between the institution itself and the wider society. Studying at La Sapienza in Rome doesn't have the same access of permeability with the town than a different one than another university, private university here in Rome, for instance. Studying in a university like Parma, which has 32,000 students in a town of 180, has a different relationship with the local society. How much are they separated, the universities, from the society they are into? Is there a campus outside the town, or is it downtown? This also makes a difference. The problem of ranking, that in Italy now, also the ministry, recently the Ministry of the University of Public Education, referred in some official documents to international rankings, because there are no national rankings at the moment. And of course, here there is a huge debate about international ranking. But all these elements do not represent everything in this perspective of the global formation and intercultural education. Thank you. So, a few words about the methodology of research. Quantitative and qualitative. To use the words by the late president of the International Geographical Union, Adalberto Vallega, from the rationalistic approach and the humanistic approach. Macroanalysis and microanalysis, of course, the two terms of the question. Of course, we do have official data. We have data. Let's just look a moment at the categories. There is a bureaucratic problem for Italian universities, because we found the data of both our universities classified in three categories. Communitarian students, so foreign citizens but belonging to other European Union countries. Non-communitarian students, but that are living in Italy, because their families are living in Italy. And for these categories, there are no limits for enrollment. But for non-communitarian students whose entrance in Italy for study purposes is subject to limits. So we found three bureaucratic categories. This to give you just a few numbers. I don't want to go into details. These are, for instance, the numbers of the University of Eastern Piedmont in 2009-2010. It's just worth to notice the dominance of the School of Medicine, to go back to what Barbara was saying before, and to the business school. These are the data for 2010-2011. So small numbers, what is behind this number? What is important in Italy is that this phenomenon of foreign students is changing. It has a tradition since the 70s. There was mobility. For instance, there were a few cases, especially from Greece, from the United States, for instance, at veterinary school. there was a long tradition of international students coming to Italy, but the growth and the variety of provenance is a very recent phenomenon. They have been in Italy for a few years, so it's normally a long-term project for the student curriculum. And, of course, the link with international relations. It would be worth to investigate the relationship with Romania and Albania that are dominant nationalities in the data that we saw before. To conclude, microanalysis, it's the idea of in-depth interviews. We do find at the University of Eastern Piedmont, for instance, a collaboration with the alumni offices, which is another interesting novelty in the Italian panorama. It wasn't very well established, the idea of the alumni, of the ex-students in the university. The university in Vercelli provides even a channel on YouTube with interviews to students. And for instance, Etienne Sadio, who came from Cameroon and now is planning to move from Italy after obtaining a degree to the United States with complex itinerary of migration, or Zhu Yung Chen from China, who came for a foreign languages degree in Vercelli, but then decided to go back to Taiwan and open a bar. Also, there are exchanges linked to the international political level. For instance, a group of students from Palestine with European Union and the United Nations funds were able to come to Vercelli, and also with public funds from European Union was created a new course for the preservation of artistic cultural heritage in the Near East, putting together the knowledge of the school, yes, thank you, with the idea of developing an international partnership. Concluding, here is the bibliographic references I used so far. The complexity of the individual migratory projects reminded us of a joke, of an old joke about geography in school, when a professor asks to a student who is terrified about the exam of geography, and the professor asks the inhabitants of Milan. And the student is very happy because he knows that there are 1,000,000 to 400,000, 50,000, and 343, and he's very happy in answering. And the professor is not happy and is there and says, no, I want to know the names. And in a certain sense, it is necessary to know the names, and not only the names, of course, by the individual itineraries in migration. Thank you very much.
Davide, thank you very much for your presentation. That gave us a conceptual framework for your focus on mobility of international education students. Questions in the audience? Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation. Just one question. You mentioned the teaching overall quality, and this is a criteria present, for example, in the yearly rankings made by the Times Higher Education supplement. And I would like how it is possible to estimate this quality.
At the moment, and this is a hot topic in Italy because of the new reformation of the university, that for instance, it's a very recent practice, the distribution of evaluation forms at the end of the courses, so satisfaction by students. It came to my mind the formula satisfaction by customers, because that's the kind of language that we heard about. But, second is in Italy another big issue was especially till the reformation of the university at the end of the 90s, early 2000s, the period in which the students would remain enrolled at the university beyond the official length of the curriculum, which was a very common practice, and it's decreasing now, but it's still very high. So in a curriculum of 3 years, let's say half of the students would take 4 or 5 years to finish it. And this is considered by the ministry an important factor to see the efficiency of the teaching, if all the students finish at the right time limit. For instance, these are the two key factors that are used.
Thank you for the presentation. I would like to ask one question. How many foreigners continue from, for example, from bachelor degree, master degree, and doctoral degree? Because I know in this medicine is quite long period for studies, at least 6-7 years. We should expect more. Thank you.
This depends very much, at least in our universities, and thinking of the size, from school to school. For instance, in humanities school, it's quite normal that the 3 years curriculum has much wider number of students than the 2 years second degree curriculum. While, for instance, for some degrees like engineering or architecture, even some universities maintained a 5-year curriculum. But so it depends very much on the school. Also, this must be interpreted related to the situation of international students. We are, since for the Italian law, even if you are born in Italy and from parents of foreign citizenship, you are considered a foreign citizen till you are 18 years old, and then you can apply for the Italian citizenship. It doesn't come naturally. So this brings that the statistics at the school level are affected by this, because we have huge number of foreign students in schools that are, of course, sons of and daughters of immigrants. And this is affecting the university now, because the wave of immigration that actually started in Italy consistently 20 years ago reached before kindergartens and then primary school, and then is going up now, high school, and is entering the university, with this bureaucratic problem that even if you are 19 and you have your request for Italian citizenship under process, you are still considered foreign at every level. But in any case, we have still very limited numbers of foreign students in the upper degree levels, different discourses for the masters, which sometimes are targeted to an international audience, because bureaucratically is the easiest way to do something in English, because the masters have more independence from the regulations of the curriculum.
Further questions, please? It's not the case. David, one question from my viewpoint. Is it a specific situation of the mid-sized universities that the students with migratory background are studying here, or is it also for the larger cities and universities a new trend, or a general trend?
This is a very complex issue, because also the proliferation of universities in minor towns and cities has been a recent phenomenon in Italy in general. For instance, the University of Eastern Piedmont was before a branch of the University of Turin, and then gained its official and bureaucratic independence only 12 years ago, about. So the dispersion of universities in the national territory has been a recent phenomenon, affecting, of course, also the internal movement of national students. So the idea, the trend has been very much of encouraging sort of local universities, keeping together some huge and attractive universities in big cities. The problem is now that due to economic crisis, there is a strong opposite movement, and they are now trying to close many of the minor branches because of budget cuts. And this is happening, for instance, with the Polytechnic of Turin, who had a branch again in Vercelli in the same town. And we are speaking of a 48,000 inhabitants town that had two universities, one autonomous and one as a branch of Turin. So the problem is very complex. Also, this must be linked to the dispersion of the immigration from major gateways like big cities into the national territory, and also a larger discourse on quality of life and the sort of trendy appeal of medium, small-sized towns. And last, of the economic costs, which tend to be, of course, less critical in medium, small towns.
Yeah, thank you very much, both authors, for their presentation. Davide for the presentation, and Carlo. Thank you very much. Yeah, now we continue with, we go to Japan and have a very actual topic. Yoshitaka Ishikawa, Yoshi, it's easier to say, will give us an introduction in the displaced human mobility in Japan due to the earthquake, tsunami, and nuclear plant accident.
The presentation so far were mainly concerned with international student flows as involuntary voluntary flows, but I and the next speaker, Isoda, will deal with displacement, involuntary migration in Japan. Nowadays, most human mobility in the contemporary world is considered voluntary. However, large-scale displacement migration occurred in Japan due to the tsunami on March 11th, as well as the subsequent nuclear power plant crisis. The purpose of this presentation is to investigate the complicated evacuation of refugees, including the temporal changes in this process. Let me start by giving an overview of the damage. The East Japan Great Earthquake with 9.0 magnitude was the largest ever observed. It occurred at 2:46 p.m. on March 11th.